Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Sultans of Security podcast. This is Sean Dennis here, and with my handsome friend Shane Moroz.
My hair's looking good, I hope. Took a
Mine's
lot of
not.
time
That's
today
why.
to cut it.
Mine's not. That's why I got a hat on. Um, today we're talking episode 4, and we're going to be talking about a topic that Shane has a lot more familiar with, and a lot of people know in the media, about the filming of law enforcement officers while they're in the commission of doing their jobs, and also the proliferation of the use of body worn cameras, or BWCs, as the acronym that's floated around out there. Based upon research, and Shane can attest to here shortly, over the last decade, the use of body worn cameras in law enforcement agencies has ramped up. Started in 2013. 2014 was a real big push, and that was the impetus for that was the Michael Brown case out of Ferguson, Missouri. That whole situation really brought to light the potential use of body-worn cameras, and really started agencies around the country and states having to look at making it mandatory for departments. As of right now, there's about 25 states that require use of body-worn cameras by all their law enforcement agencies. There's 6 more considering it, and then there's varying degrees as to if there's audio restrictions. Is it just video? Is it video and audio? Or whether it's been legislated or there's pending legislation. So it's kind of all over the map right now. It's not something that's been federally mandated, by our national organizations or the Department of Justice. So they haven't, gone and said that this needs to be across the board with all law enforcement agencies in the United States. So it's been a state-by-state basis. So what you
That's
got,
pretty
Shane?
much it. So, yeah, I mean, just getting back to the subject of recording, I think if we take the step back, because I wouldn't say one necessarily happened because of the other, but the idea of recording police did eventually lead to BWCs in the converse, because all right, thought if people are recording what we're doing, there should be something neutral attached that's recording what's going on from the absolute start to the absolute finish, as opposed to just seeing the highlight of showing some kind of impropriety. So I just, from my personal experience, I can remember like the early 2000s, the first instance of someone recording what I was doing. And at first there was like this uncertainty because it was a new type of technology. Not everyone had, an easy means of recording someone till the 2000s. That's like in the 80s and 90s, someone's going to walk around with a camcorder on their shoulder everywhere they go, trying to record somebody. And it was one of those things at first. It was like, all right, you can't do that because you don't have my permission. And we eventually would learn that that's actually not the case. And so, just like any kind of thing that's new, you have to learn about it, research it, and then finally come up with, okay, here's the policy. Here's not based on what law is there. And so, at least from the local standpoint, recording can take place of police activity, with the exception being, if it's somehow interfering with at least in Maryland, interfering with the officer or hindering what the officer is trying to do. And that's a very nebulous term. It's a very broad term at least in Maryland, for the officer to be able to say, well, by recording, you're interfering with what I'm able to do. You're distracting me from this arrest. You're literally physically in between me and the thing that I'm trying to do, arrest someone, investigate, etc. So, and in those circumstances, yes, the recording can be stopped, and the person can be told to stop, or eventually, if be arrested because they're hindering with that type of activity. So, and I think it's adapted well to where, at least in Maryland, that the officers are adjusted to that, to know, look, what I'm doing is being recorded, not just by people on the street holding up a phone, but by surveillance cameras, by passing red light cameras and other things that are constantly recording, that by municipalities, by businesses. And these are also resources that police can use to obtain information, but it can again also record what the police are actually doing. So, and from that, eventually came about the BWCs, the body worn cameras that the police were being told to wear. And I can remember, taking the familiarization course on BWC, and one of the first things that it kind of stuck in my mind from the training was they said that everybody acts different when they're being recorded, no matter who it is. If you know that someone's recording you, you're going to act differently. You may not say the same exact thing. You might not do the same exact thing. And that's not to say you're going to do something illegal. It's just that in your subconscious, your unconscious, however you want to look at it, you know that what I'm doing is being captured. So I need to act in a certain manner. And we adjusted from there. We adapted. We learned how to utilize them, how to wear them, the different ways that we could wear them. We had to have 2 points of contact on our person, on our uniform, be it a hat visor or a lapel pin on the shoulder, or some other means that we could have 2 ways to wear the camera at all times. And there's different terminologies that go with anything. This is no different. BWC, body worn camera, is an acronym. You had terms like buffering, which simply meant that for us, we had to have the camera physically operating at all times while we were on duty out on the street. But it wasn't always recording the audio portion. It would just record that video portion. And then at some point, either if we activated it manually, or in the case of driving, we actually had a connection to where if you flipped on your overhead lights, it would automatically start recording to kind of save you from having to do 2 things at once while you're trying to drive an emergency. And what that buffering did was this. No, either the Jetsons are here or I didn't turn my volume down. It would start recording it would take the last 30 seconds that had previously been recorded, and it would capture that that video portion, and then it would start the audio portion at the moment you hit the record button again, or that flip was switched. And that would be something that would stay on until you physically turn the camera off. And then we'd have to take whatever we downloaded and record it, put the device into a system which would upload the images, and we'd have to catalog it. And there it was for anyone to have access to it because of the Freedom of Information Act. With some exceptions, if there was something personal that was there that it wasn't privy to the public, that could be redacted. Or if there was something of an administrative nature, it would also depend on how long we would save it as well. Because just an accidental recording, I believe it was like after a year, those would be pitched. But it was serious incidents, police-involved incidents that were either considered controversial or important, could be kept much, much longer. And so that's kind of where we stand at this point.
And that's one of the things I was saying in the research too, is that, and it's different by state to state and department to department about how long recordings are kept for. There are some states with some agencies that have an automatic after 21 days footage is released, can be released to the public. There's others that require you to, if you want it, file a Freedom of Information Act request to get the footage. So again, there's no standard, which I'm sure makes it difficult. And going back to it, I guess cameras have been the use of cameras and recording have been around for a bit, because now thinking back to when I was with the auxiliary, riding with some officers had dash cams in their car, and they wore mic packs that had the microphones on them. So it was like you were talking about, they initiated a traffic stop and then flip the lights on. When they go to exit the car, then they had a little button on their waistband that they would hit, and it would start recording the audio, and it would start recording the video from the dash camera. And like, it was actually like I'm pretty sure it was a VHS.
VHS tape.
I believe so.
Or CD maybe.
Maybe, but it was in the trunk of the car. Like it wasn't cloud based, but there was, or maybe it was just a hard drive in the trunk of the car where it was being recorded to you for that police car. And so I remember having to, if I didn't get out of the car with the officer at the traffic stop, if I didn't need to, if I was staying in the car, officer come back. And so then you had to be remembering about what you're talking about, because the microphone's on, and it stayed on for the duration of the traffic stop until it's cleared. So having to really, as you're talking about, like, we're being recorded, so, act differently, talk differently than you would if that microphone wasn't going for the traffic stop.
Right.
So having to remember to, because again, I was on a stage where I was wanting to be, full-time law enforcement. So asking questions that to learn about what the officer was doing. So, having to make sure that asking appropriate questions to not get them in trouble, or, in case the footage was used for whatever. But, it was a thing, whereas audio was all the time, video was just when you could see when the officer was out of the car approaching the vehicle on the traffic stop. But it was catching
Right.
but the audio was going all the time.
Yeah.
So the camera, so you had, like, for you, because I haven't seen maybe a couple places, but how cumbersome was it having to have two cameras on you at all times?
Well, it was one camera, but we had to have two mounts, so that if the shoulder mount broke, I'd have a way to put it on something else. Be it a
Okay.
hat. There was actually a sunglass mount, which that was kind of odd for me to having this thing on the side of my head, so I never really wore that one. But my sunglass had it just in case I needed them. So you just kind of got used to it. It wasn't heavy, it wasn't bulky. The one device, which was the actual base, was probably the size of a pack of cigarettes. That big, like 3 inches by 4 inches maybe. And then the camera itself was no bigger than, a little bit larger than like your standard USB drive. And then you had a wire that connected both. So, in addition to putting on all the other gear, you just kind of got acclimated to, okay, now I got to mount my camera on. So, the physical aspect of it didn't really change. It wasn't a burden to carry. It was just that remembrance of, okay, am I buffering? All right. Or is the camera at least on? And these devices, as far as the recording, were very specific. They would capture when you physically turned it off. So let's say you were driving around and you turned the camera off, and then an incident occurred. They could say, well, why did you turn your camera off prior to this incident? Because we have you physically turning your device off at 10:30 in the morning, and then something happened at 10:40 or 10:31. So that sort of thing. And there was a monthly review of the cameras by the command staff at a random in a random sense, not kind of targeting one individual officer, to say there's some checks and balances here. We're just pulling so many cameras at random to see, let's see how this officer did, and is there any room for improvement, or is there something we can commend them on. Just that I don't have the experience of storing the information about what's all involved, but I just remember there being a need for several amounts of computer space to store all this information, because you're recording, let's say there's 1,900 officers in Baltimore County Police Department. How many of those are working every day? And you're having to record that for 365 days a year. So with larger agencies like New York and so on and so forth, I cannot imagine what's required and the staff that's required. It was something that was new until you had to create entire divisions to manage this stuff. But I think a lot of agencies have adapted now to it, and they're getting acclimated to it, just like the people are. That they're being recorded by the police, and vice versa.
Now, I guess the question is were you allowed to turn your camera off if you were using the restroom? And if so, did you have to document that? Like, did you have to document, like, hey, I went to use the head at this time, and that's why my camera was off?
No, nothing like. Only thing, if something occurred, if an incident occurred, and then it was reviewed, then you would have to explain why you turned it off. But you didn't have to document, well, I turned it off to use the restroom, or I turned it off because I was having a meeting with my supervisor. Just like anything, it was one of those things of, if it was needed, if someone needed to know why you did it, it was after the fact, and you had to have an explanation for it.
Okay. No, I was just curious, because I was just, as you were talking about it, just thinking about it. Otherwise, if you're reviewing footage, it's a lot of potential inappropriateness. Somebody using the bathroom, especially if you got the glasses, man, you're looking down, and there's your there's your stuff in the bathroom, in a urinal, or
the mirror or whatever.
Or if you're going to use the restroom and you accidentally hit the button to start recording the audio, and you're putting in some work in the bathroom, and you've got that whole thing where you're trying to drop some kids off at the pool, and then that's all recorded in the review, and it was just like, we didn't like what what I mean, like having the fun time of reviewing that footage, or going through your camera footage, and like come across that, like what's happening, So I was just I was curious.
Yeah.
So
It was.
now,
Oh, go
for
ahead.
you,
Yeah.
for you, so when you started using it, did you get a sense? We talked off camera before we got online, but or as you mentioned too earlier on in the conversation, that during your training, it was it was put out there that people act differently when they're being recorded. So, in your experience, did you notice, did you after the fact, processing a stop or something like that, where historically that stop would have went completely different had your camera not been there? Did you notice those things where somebody, or was there incidents where people just no f's given about the fact that you got a camera on and they're still acting the same exact way?
Well, from the standpoint of the public, or the standpoint of like the officers themselves, or just like
No,
myself. I mean,
you're
yeah.
with you interacting with the public on a stop, working a working an accident scene, those kind of things. Did it seem like, because over a period of time, especially maybe at night, it's your camp, the equipment, it's dark, stuff starts to blend in with the uniform, so they might
Mhm.
not see it. So versus a daytime when a traffic stop, it's very evident the camera's there,
Right.
and like.
Well, yeah. I mean, just for that alone, when we would interact with anyone, if, like, say I made a traffic stop, as part of my initial dialogue, I'd have to inform them that they were being recorded by the camera, and there was no option at that point that they could say, well, I want that to be turned off. The only time that would come into play is if I was interviewing a victim of a crime or a witness of something, and then I would let them know, look, this is being recorded. They said, well, I don't want to be recorded. Then we could turn the camera off. But interacting with folks on traffic stops, suspects, you didn't have to give that permission or that notice that you're being recorded right now. As far as like, you know, if there was no feasible time to let someone know, if there was an exigent circumstance to where, that's happened. Obviously, you couldn't stop in the middle of any kind of fight to say, stand by, you're being recorded. Did you know that? Because there's just no
Yeah,
time to let somebody know.
Yelling
Um,
doing a foot pursuit, like, "Hey, I'm recording you. Stop running."
right. Yeah. It's part of that. Stop. Yeah. Stop where you are. You're being recorded, that sort of thing. But
But those
no.
incidents where when you're interviewing a witness and or a victim of a crime and they ask not to be recorded, is that a situation that you had to document, like in your report? Be like, when you're writing up the report, like, "Hey, I advise them that they're being recorded. They requested not to be recorded, and that's why turn the camera off at this time, turn it back on at this time."
Yes. Yeah. There would be documentation that, one, that it was given, and two, you have to remember, you would approach with the camera on, and then that would give, so there would be that time frame to where it was recording. So it would already be recorded that hey, I'm recording, and they would say on camera, no, I don't want to be recorded. So you'd have to save that, upload that at the end of your day, so that would be captured that way also. So yeah.
And so, saving the uploading, how much additional time at the end of your day when you're writing reports or things like that, with how cumbersome was that process, or was it not, in terms of
Well, I mean, it depended on how much you did that day. So if you had 10 traffic stops, there were 10 different incidents that you had to capture your case number into the system, and record or catalog what that recording was. So yeah, the more you did, the more you had to, document for. On average, hopefully it would take no more than a half hour, depending on, how much it was that you had there. But you also have to remember too that if you got into something like a major arrest, you know, say I worked till 2 p.m. one day and I got an arrest at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I've got to complete all the arrest paperwork. I've got to complete the charging documents, and then on top of that, you've got to catalog your recordings. So, and there were some cases where if you didn't get it that day, it wasn't the end of the world. You could go back your next shift and then record it. But it was almost like, even if you didn't catalog it, you definitely had to put that little USB size thing into the port to upload that video to the system so that it was saved. So give me a
so it's
second
like,
here. Yeah.
yep.
Yeah. Sorry, my battery's letting me know that it's running low, so I just got to plug in so we can keep going. Oh. All right.
Um,
Just adjust a little bit here.
so
Okay.
so the since it was a USB file, so it was just like so there was like individual files for each time the recording happened. So you just have to just pull that file and then upload it.
Yeah, pull that file, upload it, catalog it with its individual case number and the reason for the recording, traffic stop versus, criminal investigation, accidental recordings would occur. Like I said, if you're checking out your car in the morning and you just, let me make sure my lights work. And then you're flipping that switch and then, now I've recorded for 10 seconds of me going, I just recorded myself. So that's something that you'd have to catalog, accidental recording. So. But people learn to adjust. They would, let's turn our camera on after we check our lights in the morning. So
And so
yeah,
then I'm assuming there was, and I'm sure it evolved over time, but there was obviously safeguards in place that kept any officer from being able to delete a file, right?
yeah, there were safeguards because when you recorded, um, that's like a timestamp or an actual physical file that was on your system. You couldn't access the file and delete out the thing you recorded. Hence when the requirement to upload every day. So yeah, there was no opportunity to, I accidentally recorded something, or, I recorded that, but I don't want people to know about that, So yeah, there was, which is a good thing, I think, for transparency, for, the fact that when these came about, and like I said, it was about 2016 is when the cameras started rolling out. And initially, they were going to try to have it done by 2018, but there was a case in Baltimore County with a police-involved incident that kind of ramped up the requirements. So yeah, by 2017, yeah, pretty much everyone in the department had a camera, and just had to start adjusting to having them.
So is that including lieutenants that would have to come out for um, incidents? If there was an officer involved incident and a lieutenant's coming out to the scene to talk to officers about what happened, were they equipped with cameras as well?
Yes, the everyone who I would say up to the rank of captain, I can say for sure, had to go through the program. As far as like the higher upper echelon, I don't know concretely, but at that point I was a supervisor as a sergeant. I had to have a camera, and I know my lieutenant did, and so we weren't exempt from them, and we were subject to review just like anyone else. So yeah, there was a third party in the sense that if the lieutenant had a recording, then the captain could look at it. If the captain had a recording, then the major could look at it. But again, as far as the upper management, I should say, I'm not really sure. Again, in those positions, you're generally administrative type staff, so you're not interacting with the public in the same sense that you would as a patrol officer or supervisor, or even a shift commander.
Now, obviously, undercover guys aren't wearing body cameras, but do detectives, if they're out, like if they're in plain clothes, but they're detectives, like going out to interview people, are they wearing cameras? Was the SRT team wearing cameras when they're doing when they're doing entry for a situation? Were they required to wear cameras as well?
So yes, SRT or TAC as we called it, yes, they did have to wear cameras. The detectives do not have to wear cameras. Now they do have them because they could then be detailed, let's say, for special events where they have to put the uniform on. So now, yeah, I got to put that camera on. But no, generally the plainclothes investigative units did not have to wear them. Definitely undercover officers weren't going to wear any kind of BWC. But
Right.
yeah.
Now,
So
initially, what was the feeling amongst the officers from your experience? Like,
from my
and then,
experience,
yeah,
just having conversations or what I thought about it, I thought it was a great thing, just because we looked at it like, and I looked at it like, well, we're being recorded by others, so let's get these recordings out that we have. So there's that again, that unbiased, from start to finish account of what occurred. Because what I've noticed personally, when you see these videos posted to TikTok or YouTube, you've got this interaction that's already underway, and it paints a very negative light on what the police are doing. And obviously, just like with any profession, this has been talked about ad nauseum. But yes, there's some bad apples, and there are bad officers, there's bad doctors, there's bad, accountants, etc. But what you would see predominantly is here's the police arresting someone or utilizing a use of force without any kind of backstory as to why they were doing it. And then there was the negative commentary, the cops are at it again, these pigs, et cetera, et cetera. So having that BWC was great for, I think, the agencies and personally to say, well, here's why this occurred. Because we started with this incident that escalated because of what the suspect did. And, I would say predominantly justified the officer's actions. I think I have to look at it concretely, but I think there was actually backlash to the BWC implementation by some civil liberties union organizations because they said, whoa, wait a minute, this is showing that the police are doing the right things more often than not. Maybe we don't want these things anymore. Again, I'd have to research that a little bit more in depth to give you, which unit or which organization said that. But I just found that fascinating out of everything to hear that kind of, negative feedback about PWCs.
Well, it's a lot of times like they want to see improvements of things, and then agencies actually go ahead and do that. Then they're like, oh wait a minute, let's pull back on that.
Yes, pull back on that. So.
So after the implementation, after they were used for a period of time, did you notice or hear like scuttlebutt from the academy, or notice at in-service trainings? Was there changes made to some of the ways you guys did things? Was there policy changes that came out that were driven by, and now that you have data in order to help shape things for improving that? I mean, the idea is to hold accountable. Obviously you're going to find some things where maybe now you see that something that, the training part of some of the training at the academy is not as up to par where it should be. And now we have a means of way of capturing that and seeing like how we can improve those things so that we can better prepare all of our officers on the street. Did you notice any kind of changes like that, or did you think that there was some policy changes came out that might have been correlated to the implementation of the body-worn cameras?
I'd say that, beyond just this is the SOP on how to use the camera, how to upload data, et cetera, I think the biggest change came about in the court system because never before did you have an opportunity to review evidence or testimony that an officer would give. So the example I can identify the most with would be the DUI traffic stops. And I bring that because before you would have, if we're doing standard field sobriety tests or SFSTs, you'd have to write down what the suspect was doing. If they were, walking heel to toe, they were doing the one leg stand, you could say, okay, at, step number 3, they went offline, or at step number 5, they raised their arms, or they didn't follow the instructions. Well, now you had this entire encounter recorded, so the defense attorneys would then say, well, no, officer, you said that they stepped off on step 4, but your recording clearly shows it was step 3. Now we've created reasonable doubt, not guilty, would be the push by the defense attorneys, and ultimately, what would occur. So yeah, I found that it created more of a need to specifically capture in your paperwork exactly what occurred line by line. So that these officers that were making these arrests routinely would have to take an extraordinary amount of time to ensure that they got it absolutely correct. And not because they were trying to hide something, it's because it was going to be used against them, ironically, in a court of law. So yeah, that's the biggest change. Not only that, but the acceptance of an officer's testimony, I think, of itself was accepted for all of my career until the cameras, and that created that sense of, well, we'd like to believe the officer, but it wasn't recorded. Or do we have a recording of that? No. Well, then how can we trust what the officer said? So that's, I think, that the biggest change that I saw about it was once you made that arrest and those charges were placed, that when it went to court, that's where you'd find your biggest hurdle. So.
And then, I mean, was there any recommendations like for those instances given from the DA's office or the prosecutor's office? You're like, hey, like they would push back towards the department, like, hey, you probably need to consider doing this with the officers, either preparation for the cases or in the handling of the processing of the paperwork or those kind of things.
Yeah, I mean, the pushback was, as you're writing out your statement of charges for anything, not just the DUIs, you have the opportunity to review your body-worn camera footage to see what it is that occurred so that you're documenting it accurately and to reflect what is captured on your statement so that the two match. So, yeah, and that's that kind of training that came about, not so much from the academy per se, but as updates and SOPs and within the commands themselves. And as a supervisor, I would say, all right, did you double check your BWC? Do you see a match to what does everything line up to what you've written down here?
And then, I guess experience, or I guess maybe things you had heard from others in the department. But was there a reduction in what people might consider heat of the moment incidents during interactions with a suspect or something like that things that weren't taught at the academy, but officers in the heat of the moment struggling with a suspect and it's on camera now. Did those seem things to improve? Was there more brought to light where there's having to, we really got to rethink about our teachings or our SOPs on certain things, with engaging with a suspect or things like that?
Yeah, I think there was definitely that heat of the moment aspect reduction. Either just saying something to somebody that you might normally not say or that you normally would say to get them to comply. I can remember one case in particular, without naming names, where an officer was reprimanded because he said something to somebody that wasn't 100%, I guess, in the best keeping. I can't remember if it was cursing at somebody or something like that. Like the incident had died down and then the comment was made. In the heat of the moment, to where you're trying to give commands to someone, if an F-bomb dropped, no, I'd say there would be no change in that or expectation that, well, we really shouldn't be doing that when we're trying to get people to stop doing things, because it's not like you're asking someone to ensure that the TPS covers on their report. You're trying to tell them to put a weapon down so that they don't try to shoot you or somebody else, and you want to go home and you want to ensure that they're doing what they need to. So yeah, if you told them to drop the effing gun, that sort of thing, then that was still accepted.
Okay. But I mean, I guess overall, there was probably some improvement in that because they're getting remembering. But I mean,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there was definitely that. And it's funny, is I see that kind of carrying over in society generally, to where just in workplace and just going anywhere that you go, the nature of the conversations now are very professional. It's almost like everyone's at work all the time. And there's like almost no room for any kind of like injecting humor into stuff. And it's kind of like, okay, but it's just my personal opinion on stuff. But yeah, I think the idea of recording is now, and not just police recording, but TikTok and stuff like that. It's got everyone thinking we're on camera 24/7, so we have to act like it.
now, and with the training now, is that integrated in part of the academy? So like, like during the course of the academy, you start being given issued different tools and you start adding to your gun belt and those kind of things as you start, as you progress into the academy. Now, is there a phase where you're issued a camera and you're wearing your camera all day while you're going through your day-to-day at the academy in order to start to get used to that, so that when you get out and you're going on field training, it's not something completely foreign to you? Well, all of a sudden now with your FTO, and now you got a camera on you. But is
Right.
it part of at the academy where now you're being trained on it so that you get into those habits now? Whereas all of you officers, that when the cameras were brought out, you're already out working in the field. And so then you're having to adapt your day to day now to putting the camera on, make sure your battery is charged. And then at the end of the day, going back to the station and downloading everything. And before you clock out, see, So your supervisor's not riding your behind. So is it now
Right.
part of the is it part of the training now so that it becomes ingrained in them? So it's a kind of an automatic thing.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak intelligently as to exactly when they learn about the BWCs and they start recording to get used to operating and mounting them and stuff like that. But when someone comes out of the academy and they go on to field training, they know how to do all those things. So at some point during the academy, they are familiarized with it and indoctrinated into the sense of, okay, is your camera on? Is it record? Is it buffering? Did I upload it? So yeah, but so that's all. That's all I can say on that.
And as far as you still know, is it still you're recording to a USB thumb drive? There's not, and I guess it's probably very difficult to try to get to cloud recording with these things, because all these packs would need antennas in order to be able to, and a constant either have to be on a cellular signal in order to be able to upload videos
Right.
in real time, up to a cloud server that you could pull them from, and then I'm sure the technology is probably not there yet.
No, it's just there's just too much of it, too much recording that has to take place, and the only thing I can remember specifically is if we had a very severe incident to where like a police involved shooting or something like that, they would actually have the technicians come to the scene so that there was an opportunity or no chance that while in transit back from the scene to the station that there was an accident and then the fire happened and all the footage got lost. So that way they would ensure, yes, we definitely uploaded this before there was any chance of any kind of accident.
That's
So
absolutely.
yeah, I mean, yeah, just a checks and balances, a coverage for that sort of thing. So, but yeah, it's just there's so much data that trying to upload that stuff to a cloud would almost be next to impossible. I think at this point, anyway. Yeah, maybe in 50 years, but don't have to worry about that.
Well, and then to think about all the smaller agencies that exist around the country and the cost of this
Sure.
stuff. Like you said, you had to stand up Baltimore County had to stand up a whole separate division with and all these technicians that had to be brought up to speed and trained in the infrastructure. I mean, because how many precincts was there in Baltimore County?
Let's see. Precinct 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 11, 10 precincts.
So you have to have servers and a server capacity each one of those precincts for the daily download of all the stuff and housing of it, and people there to work, to do that. So the costs involved, and the expectation is that, and then your funding comes from the county. So having to go back to the county, like, hey, this is going to be the price tag. You guys want reform, you want reform, but this is what it's going to cost us. If you want it implemented in the next 6 months, this is what it's going to cost you to get that.
Yeah.
Find us the money, find us the money for it.
I mean, I just pulling up an article from WJZ News from October 2017. It said the quote was, "The first 5 years of this program, BWC, is expected to cost $7.1 million." So, and then again, that's for an agency that's got 1,900 members. So, smaller agency, less cost, but then also less revenue to be able to cover that cost.
Right. So it's just like, again, everything, all improvements cost money.
Yes.
So
it's got to be the expectation. Yeah.
And and where's it going to come from? And like you referenced too, like think about agencies like NYPD, LAPD, huge organizations, and all of that, and so, but I guess the return on investment is down the road, reductions of lawsuits against officers, accusations, I mean, there's the PR standpoint of, improved, an improved spotlight on police departments that, you have officers that are doing the right thing. There's always going to be the occasional, it's not a bad apple, but there could be the occasional incident that rides a line and it's just like, was this fully appropriate? But, again, I think this ties to that conversation is like when you've had all these officer involved incidents and then I've seen several videos where you have these members of organizations that have, protested against law enforcement and against, about all for defunding police. but then you get them out there and you put them through a simulation. There was one specifically, you had where they were given a gun with simunition rounds, and they had different, they were there paired up with a reporter. So the reporter got a reporter got a chance to do the same scenarios. And there were officers, and the officers were armed with either guns or weapons, but trying to have put these people through what the police officers for that agency are going through, the training they're going through, how to react to it. And you had both the person that's in charge of this group that's against police or defunding the police and the reporter, both things where they actually, shot somebody because they feared for their lives, or they were killed themselves. And then after the incident, after they kind of calmed down a little bit, being interviewed and be like, what did you see? What did you think? And just like, having those realization moments that, it's not as easy as it looks.
Right. I've seen those myself on a couple different occasions of reporters. The exact same thing. I didn't realize what it all was involved in these decision-making processes, because they are instant in some of these circumstances. Not all the time, but there are literally, there's life and death decisions that have to be made in a split second. And that was always the rub of it, is like, when these matters go to court, when these matters go before any kind of judicial review, or these lawyers and judges have minutes, hours, days to expound upon why this decision was made, but the person who actually did it had less than a second to decide, am I going to pull a trigger against someone? Am I going to have a use of force against somebody? So yeah, it's interesting to say the least.
So I guess for me, that brings the next question would be, and I've had conversations with people about this, and it's just like, not to give an excuse to law enforcement, but I was just like, I put in perspective, it's like, okay, yeah, most Leo academies are 6 months. Some maybe straddle into 7 months, but there's a lot of information that's what a single person has to learn in that period of time. And where ultimately you're on the street, you can be put in situations where you have to make a split-second decision that could be life or death. Conversely, you have it where doctors are going through years of schooling to become a doctor, to be a surgeon, to operate on somebody, right? And so it's like, from somebody outside looking in, I could see the benefit of having longer period of time to train someone to become a police officer, so that they feel better prepared, go through a lot more paces. But I mean, outside of the cost of it, the cost is pretty hefty to train, like training one person for that 6 months, and everything that goes into that. As somebody who's been in the profession, and I mean, where do you think you stand on that? Do you think there would be a benefit to, like, not maybe a year, maybe it takes a full year to train somebody, so that way,
yeah,
because of the law classes, the driving, the shooting, things I've always joked about is like, you need to basically be a C student to graduate a police academy for shooting. When you want somebody who's an A student, 90% higher accuracy, you know what I mean? And then and to be put more in stress inoculation to really see, to work out those things, because being involved in stressful situations and going through drills and training and stuff like that, talking with other people too, things break down in those stressful situations. So in order to help better prepare, so when you go out on the street, besides, you have your 6 months of your academy, then your what was field training time with Baltimore County? How long were you on field training for?
2 months. So you had 4 weeks with one FTO, field training officer, and then 4 weeks with another. So at the end of that 8-month period, you had, that's the training, total training, 8 months.
Okay.
So then you were on your own, right?
Then you're on your own, right? To run solo, do your patrols, and so. Do you think there could be a benefit for more training time for police officers?
I think, and that's the rub of it. Yes, and yes, there could always be more. The more training, the better. The more time to learn something and get it right, I think you can't say no to that. Where you come into difficulty is it feasible? Is it, can we do that? Because we've got, and again, this is just ballpark. You have 100 officers that are retired, So now we have 100 spots that we have to fill. If we take longer to fill those spots, how is that helping or hurting the county? Not only that, but then the more time you spend training, that's more cost involved. So that's now less people that are actually going through. And then what exactly are you going to be learning in that extra time that you're not covering in that 6 months of academy and 2 months of field training? Is there things like ethics classes? Are there there was an opportunity when I went through, again, this is 22 or 2000. If you had enough credit, you actually got college credits for some of your courses that you could apply toward an AA degree in criminal justice. So, at the bare minimum, could we start to make that a requirement that, all right, you want to be a police officer, you got to have your AA in criminal justice. So that might take you a year. That could be something, just to give someone an extra piece of information to be able to utilize when they're making a decision. Are there courses that that aren't covered in that academy time that could be added? Takes a semester, let's say. That could definitely be something that could only help. I just can't see it. I can't see it hurting someone to have more information. You talked about surgeons. There's always that running gag of, what do you call someone who graduates medical school last? Doctor. So even if they were the worst person in their medical school, they're still a doctor.
Right.
The person that finishes the bare minimum of going through the academy is still a police officer. Just from my experience, I think there's a lot of systems in place then and now to be able to weed through those who aren't really destined for this type of career, because no, it's not for everyone. Just like any other career, someone's interested in it, they start it, they make the realization, or the people in place in power can make the realization, this isn't the best course, life course for you, because of these reasons. And those reasons can vary from how you interact and how you deal with the stress and how you perform what's required as a police officer. So yeah, that's my answer.
So I guess to piggyback on that too, so if, say, we can't right now at this time extend the academy time, right? And we're gonna keep the field training program to 2 months. But then, is there benefit on the back end when you're out there when in-services come up? Could the in-services be more intentional? Could there be a little bit more provided for the in-services? So other than just checking a box and saying, okay, yes, I went through and I redid my OC this year, or I redid my ASP training or whatever, to be more intentional to making sure that, all the officers, however long it's been since they've been through the academy, that they're all, that we're keeping to the same standards for everybody. And not just because, well, you've been on the job for 18 years, we kind of just just going to go through the motions, get through this in-service, and
Right.
we're going to move along, versus somebody, okay, you just came out of the academy like 6 months ago. Here's your in-service. We expect a little bit more out of you. Could be, because I think it's the conversation we had before where about fitness standards with police, with law enforcement agencies, and where you have unions, police unions, that are against it. You have some agencies that have a standard, like Maryland State Police. No matter at what age, there's still minimum fitness standards you have to meet every year to be able to stay working. It's good. So kind of, I'm looking at it from that perspective too. It's just like, will that help? Does that help to change the idea and the picture of what people think of police officers? If things were more intentional with the training that are provided to the officers.
Yeah, the in-service training, it's there's different agencies have different minimal standards, but as far as what you had to do every year to keep up with your training that was absolutely required. Yeah, there was you had to shoot your gun once or twice a year. I can't remember exactly how often you have to do it now, but it started out twice a year. You had to go and requalify. As far as in-service training, it was once a year, and it varied from 2 to 3 days, and there was 8-hour days, and some of the information was very beneficial in the sense that it was constitutional law updates, or here's information that we learned from this incident. The unfortunate thing with with incidents that occur in getting training out as soon as possible is that you have a liability in the sense that if there's an officer involved shooting, let's say, or a terrorist incident, there's police somehow involved in it, all those processes have to go through if there's, say, criminal charges or the potential for civil cases, all that has to be handled before you can then go back and talk about, all right, here's what occurred with this person, and here's what we learned from it, and here's what we can do to improve and do better, because you don't want to start training your officers on something that down the line in a criminal case or a civil court that they say, well, the officer shouldn't have done that. Well, now you've gone and told off your officers what they should do, and it's found to be the wrong thing. So that's the biggest hurdle I see, is that time frame that you have to wait to get a lot of information out because you don't want to be sued because you said the wrong thing. So, yeah, that's the rub of in keeping your officers up to date on information, but having it be meaningful.
So I guess the last thing I have for our discussion today. So a lot, the idea with the body worn cameras and everything like that is it's for accountability. It's helping to improve police officers, to be better in their profession. We talked about training. I guess for me, the last question I have, and again, for somebody outside looking in, having lots of friends in different law enforcement agencies, different stories, hearing different things. What are your thoughts on the emphasis that more mental health support needs to be provided to people, first responders, not just police officers, but fire and EMS? And do you think that would help officers to, in their day-to-day jobs, to be better officers?
Absolutely. I mean, I've seen there be a huge influx of that type of peer support. Not just, an incident occurs and the sergeant says to the person, "You okay? Everything's good?" And they go, "Yeah, I'm good." And that's the end of it. There's definitely been strides over my time in the agency and beyond where I've seen that peer-to-peer support, that organizational support to say, look, it's not natural for people to have to see these types of things, not only on the day to day, but for the year after year after year. The carnage of accidents, the carnage of someone being shot or child abuse or any of those horrible things that not just police have to experience, but again, your first responders, military, that's go through. So yeah, I think that that's important, and I think that at least from a local standpoint, I think Baltimore County has made strides with that, huge strides. I mean, just one example I can think of, we had a fatal collision that occurred a couple years ago. 2 pedestrians were killed, and there was officers that responded to it. And once that incident was over, there was actually a follow-up by Baltimore County with anyone who had responded to that to be able to have some support, not only immediately with this meeting, but also to say, look, if you need to talk to someone, here's someone you can call, because not everybody wants to, take the time, either the time or feels they can raise their hand and say, yeah, that really affected me. Can I talk to somebody because of the stigmata of being that person that they couldn't take it or whatever. So, yeah, I think lots of improvements have been made and are still being done.
All right, cool. I mean, like I said,
Yeah.
I think it's important because I mean, I know you've known plenty of people that gotten divorced. Like I said, police officers. I think it's statistically known that police officers have like the highest divorce rate of any profession in the country, because of lots of things. The stressful environment, what you're talking about, things that they see on a day-to-day basis that they don't feel like they can go home and talk to their spouse about. Some things they can't talk to them about, and then it's just like, who can they talk to them about? And then too, it's one of those things, like you said, the stigma of, if I share this, am I going to be deemed not fit for duty? I'm not going to be able to do this job because you love the job, but you want to share it, want to keep it bottled up because, oh no, they're going to pull me off the road.
Right.
I can't,
I think, yeah. Yeah, I think there was a real concern about that when I first started because of, that's the way it was always, kind of perceived that, you just had to take those things and bottle them up and never share. But over time, over the 2 decades that I did, was in law enforcement, that definitely kind of got squashed. And the preferable thing was, look, we realize we're actual human beings with feelings and thoughts, and we don't just segment these things, and or you can't just take Control Alt Delete and then that bad memory's gone. So yeah, so that aspect I think is a great thing to recognize that, and we're doing things about it. So
Good.
yeah.
All right, man. I think it was a great conversation today.
Absolutely.
Thank you for sharing all your insight as usual. Said it again. First person perspective is always good. So again,
Yeah.
everybody out there, thank you for joining us today. Again, if you want to get in touch with us, be a guest on the show, please reach out to us at SOSPodcast76 at Gmail. That's SOSPodcast76 at gmail.com. So as
All right.
always,
Thank you,
I enjoyed
everybody.
my time. Thank you, Sarah. I enjoyed my time with you. It was good talking with you. Until next time.
Take care. Be safe.
You too.